Studios, kicking off a brand new week. Joining us now, Mike Hurst, former U.S. Attorney. Mike, good to see you.
Good morning, Gerard. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So it seems like in our current day and time, the issue of race has to be injected into every issue. Every issue. It's just like, let's just go ahead and default to that. Now we have the situation with the water in the city of Jackson, Mississippi's capital city, and we've got the EPA, the federal EPA, right, that has initiated a lawsuit, I believe, or an investigation, pardon me, not a lawsuit yet, at least, against the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality. Is the Department of Health involved in that as well,
correct.
Right?
That's correct.
Because they have some responsibility under state law with respect to municipal water systems. But anyhow, they're basically investigating them. I'll just kind of lay it out and let you talk. For engaging in racial discrimination, potentially, in the allocation of federal grant money, which these agencies at the state level oversees. This grant money is targeted at municipalities to help them with their water system. So they're saying that because the state is primarily run by white people at the state level, right, in state government, there are no African-American minority statewide officials, that they're engaged in racial discrimination in the allocation of this money, and they want to investigate that as maybe the core reason and the culprit for Jackson's failing water system.
Yeah, and let me remind your listeners that this administration, the Biden administration, this year within the Department of Justice, which is what I'm familiar with, set up an Office of Environmental Justice.
Right.
So what EPA, the Office of Inspector General here is doing is they've initiated an investigation in the city of Jackson, specifically against, as you said, Department of Health and Department of Environmental Quality under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which basically says you can't, anyone receiving federal funds can't discriminate based upon race, or
Sure.
national origin,
Sure.
gender. But here it's kind of ironic because, and I would point your listeners, I thought Jimi Hendrix did a great op-ed yesterday in the Northside Sun, just basically laying out the history, the facts, specifically with regard to the water issues in Jackson. And he notes that really the impetus behind making sure the citizens of Jackson get clean, safe drinking water has been the Mississippi Department of Health.
Yeah.
It hasn't been the city of Jackson. It hasn't been any of these incompetent mayors we've had in the last few years. It's been the state that has been ensuring this. Some of your readers or your listeners may know this, but the Department of Health is the one who reported the city of Jackson to the EPA a couple of years ago. And if you may remember, Gerard, EPA came down, found all of this, found the O.B. Curtis water treatment facility and the other treatment facilities in unbelievable conditions literally on the cusp of failing, and basically, hammered the city of Jackson. But the city of Jackson, the city council, and the citizens of Jackson did not know anything about that EPA report for a full year.
Right.
The mayor hid it for a full year.
From the city council.
From the city council and from the citizens of Jackson, that you, citizens, may be drinking unsafe water.
Right.
But the whole impetus behind that was the state. The state Department of Health was the one trying to ensure that the citizens of Jackson were having clean drinking water, while the mayor was trying to hide the unsanitary conditions of the facilities in Jackson.
Because I believe state law charges the Department of Health, right? There's provision in statute that says Department of Health's got to make sure every municipality is delivering clean, safe drinking water.
That's right. And here, this is such a political thing with the EPA, OIG coming in and investigating on the basis of Derek Johnson, this local political hack here in Jackson, who's now the head of the NAACP, an organization that has done incredible good over a number of decades. But now you have this political hack who's a Benny Thompson, lackey, put in charge of that, making all these, as you said, racial allegations that the state is not trying to do what's best in the interest of the citizens of Jackson, which is just complete and total BS.
All right, so I'm not sure how what sort of power those two agencies have over this federal grant money. Honestly, Mike, I didn't even know such existed. That the federal government just sends money is a block, I guess, to the states, and then they determine who administers that, and it is designated specifically for water systems.
Well, and I think that's correct. I have to be a little hesitant here because I have more experience in the enforcement and the investigations and the prosecutions. What I can tell you is EPA is doing a civil investigation.
Okay,
it's not like in Flint, Michigan, you had those criminal indictments come out later. Right now, what we have is EPA is doing a civil investigation, and what will happen is what I've read is EPA has about 180 days to determine whether there is violations of the law, and if that turns out to be the case, they refer that to the Department of Justice.
Okay. And
then the litigators in the Department of Justice will bring, civil lawsuits, and if it turns out later that there are some type of criminal findings, that'll be referred to prosecutors to determine what to do there.
Okay. So basically what they're trying to at least insinuate is that there's racism involved in the allocation of this federal money, and because the city of Jackson is primarily a black community, I think it's like 83 to 17 or something like that, black to white population, they're withholding money and they're redirecting it to other communities that are more in the other direction from a racial balance perspective.
Well, and that whole argument that this is racism. I mean, again, think when the whole water system shut down a few months ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't the city running to other areas to try to bring in help. It wasn't the city trying to find people who were competent to run the facilities. It wasn't the city trying to find equipment to make sure their treatment centers are working again. It was the state.
Yeah.
The state came in. So the fact that EPA is investigating this is a shell game being put on by Derek Johnson, Chokwe Lumumba, and their henchmen in order to divert the attention to the incompetence and, frankly, I would say even some really bad ill will on their part not to deliver services. I mean, this is the basis of government. The basis of government is protecting our people and delivering basic services like trash pickup, like water. I mean, this is insane, Gerard.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, this guy keeps getting reelected. But I hope and pray that our citizens, our brothers and sisters in Jackson, would wake up and see that this guy is he is a ball of hot air. He is a balloon of hot air, and he just continues to blow. And he unfortunately has a presidential administration at his beck and call that is sending federal agents down here to investigate things that will never result in any type of finding.
It just seems like
legitimate finding.
Right. It seems like that in the strong efforts we see out of the left to always try to reduce everything down to it's rooted in racism. I mean, it detracts from actually addressing the true causes of the problem and thus solving them.
Right. No, that's exactly right. That may have worked 60 years ago. That ain't working today.
Yeah.
That ain't working today. I can tell you, when I was U.S. Attorney, I went all over Jackson, and the citizens of Jackson wanted exactly the same thing as the citizens of Newton County where I grew up.
Sure.
They wanted their families to be safe. They wanted to have clean drinking water. They wanted to watch out for each other's kids, make sure they went to really good schools, and just the basic functions of government.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the good people of Jackson are not getting the basic functions of government.
I get so just tired, honestly, exhausted with this over racialization and sexualization now of every issue that comes up. And I know that on the national stage, Mississippi is just a ripe target, right?
Oh,
for this
absolutely.
sort of stuff. Because we have a large African-American population as a composition of the total population, more so than any other state.
But I got to tell you, we're making gains in the sense of, if you look at the voting block of the African-Americans during the 2020 election, more voted for President Trump than's ever voted for in the history.
Right.
If you look at what the Mississippi Republican Party is doing with their Minority Outreach Committee and the number of elected officials or those who are running for office who are African American under the Republican banner, it is continuing to grow because they're beginning to see that the hope and the freedom and the liberties that the Republican Party espouse is on our side.
It's a lot of lip service. If you can you hang around?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to find out what kind of the next steps are and what we can expect from this investigation and where this may take us.
Sure.
We got Mike Hurst, former U.S. Attorney in the Element Well Studio. Mike Hurst, former U.S. Attorney in the Element Well Studios. We're just talking about this news that surfaced last week. We found out about where the the EPA is going to be, the federal EPA, investigating the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality and the Department of Health on possibly engaging in discriminatory activity in the allocation of federal grant money to the city of Jackson for its water systems. Apparently there's a block of money that goes to the states for that purpose. So they received a letter, right, informing them there was going to be an investigation. I was a little surprised, I don't know why I'm surprised, to learn that there is an Office of External Civil Rights Compliance. What the hell does that got to do with the EPA?
Well, it gets back to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and that's what we talked about earlier, which is anyone who receives federal funds can't discriminate. And that's what they're investigating. It's hardly ever – the EPA issues of discrimination relating to environmental issues are rarely investigated. This is a very rare instance. And I can tell you, Gerard, the one thing that does give me a little comfort is, and a lot of people may not know this, but the Office of Inspector General is actually an independent body from EPA.
Okay.
They receive their federal funding different from Congress. It doesn't come through the EPA to OIG. Okay. So they're a standalone agency. They're under EPA, but they are not governed by the entities by the administrator of EPA.
Okay.
Kind of like DOJ has an Office of Inspector General that investigates DOJ employees. EPA has the same type of thing. So in that sense, at least there appears to be some insulation of politics away from this. Okay. So that is a good thing.
Sense.
But I can tell you again, if the investigators come in here and look at all the state has done just in the last 3 or 4 years with regard to water in the city of Jackson, I mean, it's incredible how the state is going above and beyond what they are required to do to ensure the citizens of Jackson have clean and safe water.
Sure.
Despite the lack of effort or I would say even malfeasance on the part of the mayor here in this case, hiding things from the city council, being ordered to do things and just completely ignoring EPA orders. Again, going back to Jimi Hendrix' op-ed in the Northside Sun, he talks about how the mayor not only covered up that EPA report, but when a fire broke out at O.B. Curtis back in April of 2021, the pumps went out of action, and the mayor tried to blame it on supply chain issues.
Right, I remember that.
When, in fact, the mayor didn't even order the equipment for that treatment center almost a year later. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. He keeps trying to cover his butt.
And as I recall, a lot of the infractions that they cited had to do with inadequate and improper staffing levels. And we're not talking about just the number of people, but their staffing level, the very, very specific standards that must be met with respect to certified water engineers. I can't remember the exact designation, but they were failing on all those fronts.
Absolutely. So that's the report that came out, I believe it was around April of 2020 that the mayor hit.
That's right.
Talking about how, they didn't have enough staff. In fact, that report said that that if the treatment center was on an imminent and substantial endangerment of disserving the health and the citizens of Jackson.
Unbelievable.
But what a lot of folks might not know is the EPA, as recently as July of this year, so 1 month before everything hit the fan and the people of Jackson were without water, EPA issued a report in July of 2022, and it specifically faulted the fact that the water department had no utilities manager, that they had insufficient staff for 3 shifts, 7 days a week, that the water meters were malfunctioning. They were only working 70% of the time. 14,000 bills had not been sent to or received by customers. And here's the thing that blew me away. 50% of the water going out is not generating any revenue.
Right.
50%. So the conclusion, or one of the conclusions of that July 2022 report by EPA, was they contracted with the University of North Carolina to assess whether it would be better for the system, the water system in Jackson, to be governed by an entity other than the Jackson City Council. So now you have EPA OIG coming in and saying, we're going to investigate whether the state discriminated against the city because of racial issues, when the EPA just 3 months ago said, we need some professional experts, academics, to look at this and determine whether the city needs to even be in control of their own water system.
It's unbelievable. There's just been no acknowledgement whatsoever from this mayor that he bears any responsibility at all.
He's always the victim. He's always the victim. It's never his fault. It's always someone else's fault. And he's going to, again, this whole, getting Benny Thompson to gin up a congressional investigation, getting the EPA to gin up an administrative investigation, a regulatory civil investigation. These are all things to distract the public from the incompetence of this mayor, and frankly, from potentially damaging the health and safety of the citizens of Jackson.
Unbelievable. So one of the things that is being alleged is that the health department, which oversees some sort of revolving fund, which is federal money that comes to the state that they loan out to municipalities, that they have evidently some power to forgive certain amounts of those loans, that they cap the loan forgiveness, and that they essentially enforced a much stricter repayment process associated with those loans than the Congress allowed for in federal law. And therefore, they're in violation of federal law. That's one of the things they're trying to allege here. So.
Yeah, God forbid the states require more accountability when it comes to our taxpayer money. I mean, isn't that what most people should believe? I mean, you and I are paying our taxes. Shouldn't we want it to be spent properly? And this whole notion of we're going to investigate the state of Mississippi for discriminating against the city of Jackson, when the EPA itself said we need to decide whether the city of Jackson should even be in charge of its own water system.
It does seem like it's a tough argument there, Mike. I mean, you make a great point. They come out and they provide this very comprehensive report saying you're in violation of all these standards, including staffing. And then they also found that there's some emails that surfaced, internal emails from folks that work in the department, said, we don't have enough people. I'm working double and triple shifts just to make sure that this Curtis plant remains operational. And then they're going to turn around and investigate them, the state agencies, for the allocation of money?
That's why, to me, it's just so laughable. And it's sad because, unlike your listeners, there are a number of folks who, are working full-time jobs or working 2 or 3 jobs trying to get their kids raised, and they don't have the time to dig into this stuff. And, the mayor's he's a good speaker. He can say really big words sometimes, and people are going to believe him. And as the governor said, the lies that he perpetrates throughout the national media, and the media is going to run with it. He's got them on their side, and a lot of people are going to believe what he's saying. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, the EPA has already said, we really need to decide whether the city of Jackson should be in charge. In writing, whether it should be in charge of its own water system. So say now that the state is somehow discriminating against the city of Jackson when it's requiring, more accountability, after the EPA has already found that maybe the city shouldn't even be in charge of its own water system. It's kind of crazy. Even kind of crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
And, this came not too long after Congressman Thompson and also Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. They announced an investigation into the state's spending of the federal infrastructure money, which just was enacted November 21. They want to know about how that money is being allocated. I mean, my understanding is none of that nationwide has really even been implemented or put into use yet. The first project I found was some heated concrete sidewalk project in New Hampshire.
Right.
I mean, I haven't heard anything. So what is it they're investigating exactly?
They're doing what Derek Johnson asked them to do. I mean, go back and look at the connection. Derek Johnson and Benny Thompson are sewn together at the hip. This is racial politics, and that's all it is.
Well,
they're trying to divert attention from the actual thing that is happening on the ground, the incompetence and malfeasance by this mayor not to do his job.
I think you're right.
And unfortunately, Gerard, the good people of Jackson, everywhere in the city of Jackson, are the ones that are suffering because of it.
I know we got to go, but how in the world are they going to determine from a legal perspective whether or not this was discrimination? I mean, there's a lot that goes on to allocate money out of a federal pot.
That's why I don't think anything will come of this. I think the burden is going to be too high to prove intent to discriminate, or even to try to prove the effect. That's how the liberals do it. They want to show the impact or the effect of discrimination. That's not what our justice system is established upon.
What a joke. Meanwhile, the water system's still a problem.
That's right.
Mike Hurst, former U.S. attorney, has been our guest here. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you, Gerard.
Yep. We're coming right back. Half an hour left, and then we got Super Talk Mississippi Outdoors with Ricky Matthews. Stay with us.